Hey, Shawn G here from Chasing the Truth. You're about to get some of the best of samples of shows I've done over the last 5 years. God bless y'all and enjoy. Welcome to Chasing the Truth. I'm your host, Shawn Graham, and you're listening to me live on Dark Waters radio channel via the Paranormal Radio app, TalkStreamLive.com, and over on the Dark Waters YouTube channel. So I am haunting the YouTube channel as of right now. Tonight's guest is June Ahern, and I'll fill you in on my guest and all that you need to know about her, and then we'll start talking with her here in just a second. But first, what I need you to do, folks, is listen up. I'm coming straight to you from the Appalachian Mountains in southwest Virginia, dovetailed in the Kentucky and Tennessee borders. And this is obviously Chasing the Truth. So what I need you to do is go over to diamdarkwaters.com and subscribe today, and you'll get opened up to email alerts. If you sign up for the email alerts, you'll get when I go live, and also when new content's dropped on iamdarkwaters.com. Let's go over to iamdarkwaters.com today and sign up. Tonight's special guest is June Ahern. June Ahern's book tours across the United States are lively interactions as she engages the audience with candor and humor about her writings and life as a psychic medium. Her 1990 debut book, a nonfiction consumer's guide titled The Timeless Counselor, a guide to successful psychic reading, originally titled A Professional Psychic Reading as an Alternative Counseling, was the #1 seller by a new author in the 1991 New York Whole Life Expo, where she was a featured speaker. She has been a co-host and guest on radio shows, People Are Talking, a television program, and is featured in several videos on YouTube. She has written many articles and been interviewed numerous times. As well as an author, June is a professional public speaker, teacher, CHT, which I'm going to ask her about that, and life coach. Her purpose is to assist people to manifest their visions by living their unique abilities. She continues to share her psychic talents in a documentary series with the Haunted Bay San Francisco Paranormal Investigation, as seen on YouTube.com. June, thank you for coming aboard Chasing the Truth. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I am excited to have you on tonight. So tell us a little bit about you that I just did not cover.
Well, let's see. Since 1975, I would have to say that's when I began my professional career as a psychic, doing readings here in San Francisco. And it just kind of happened because of an interest more than anything. I was interested in how all of this works. When I was about 1969, I had a reading from a woman. Really my first reading outside of my mother doing tea leaf readings for us as kids growing up. And she read the playing deck cards, and while she was reading them, she said, "You're going to be in a serious accident, and there's two men by your side, and you're going to have to choose, how you're going to be." Well, within about X amount of months later, it turned to 1970, I was in a serious automobile. I was out with one guy when I had another boyfriend.
Oh,
so
okay.
No, talk about getting caught, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And it was when they took me in the ambulance from that accident. I died for a short period of time, seconds really, but enough to where it changed my whole life. When I came back, I couldn't talk about it for years. I didn't tell anybody, and I'm a pretty chatty person. And I couldn't talk about what I saw and heard on the other side, meaning the other side is I left this dimension, this planet, and I went to somewhere else. I really can't say heaven or anywhere. I think of it as another place. And when I came back, I was able to know and see things about people with no prior knowledge, and it scared me. Yeah.
Well, the title of my show tonight is obviously, the subtitle is Near-Death Experiences and Walk-Ins. And we had a chat about a week ago when we decided to get together and try to do this show tonight. Can you explain to me what your near-death experience was all about and this walk-ins caveat.
Well, my near-death experience was very beautiful. And I've talked to many people over the 45, almost 50 years since mine, and to find out what theirs is. And the majority are like mine. They have some sort of a spiritual connection of beauty. What I saw before I went in the ambulance is I was sitting in the car. This is before you had to wear, before seatbelts. I don't even think the car had seatbelts. And I looked through the window, and I had thought that there was a woman. In my mind, there was a woman standing outside, and all I could see was she was dressed in white. And even though I couldn't really hear her from the distance, she was telling me that everything was going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I got a lot of comfort from that. And then there was a policeman sitting next to me, and all of that I don't recall until I got to the hospital. But my understanding is when I went in the ambulance and died, what I had experienced was seeing these relatives, and they were in a garden. They were having a nice time. They were very happy and joyful, and this tremendous sense of peace overcame me. Really nothing I've ever experienced before, a joyful peacefulness. And I do meditate, and so I do have a great sense of peace, but really nothing like it. And these relatives were all chatting and smiling, and the only ones I really knew were my grandfather and grandmother. And I left Scotland early and came to the United States, so I don't really recall any of the other relatives outside of photographs. But they were all there, and they were smiling, and I was standing at a fence, and I wanted to go into the garden, and they waved me away, and they were saying, "Not now, June, not now, goodbye." And then I woke up in the ambulance. I woke up in the hospital. So when I came back, it was a real sense of healing. I mean, it took many years to heal from the accident. And that's where my focus of a young woman at 19 was. But I kept going back to that experience over and over in my mind, like, wow, what happened?
Now, was this experience what spurred you to have psychic abilities, or are you always had
Absolutely.
these? Okay.
Absolutely. I began to know things, and, we could call it deja vu. Like, I had a whole lot of deja vus. And then I also experienced a spirit coming, and I didn't know. It was someone I knew, a young man that lived up in Oregon, and we were both young, and we had had a relationship for a while when I was in Oregon. And I started to see, he came to me, and, I wondered, well, why has he come to me? Well, his mother called me about a week later and said he had died. And I started to interact with spirits. My grandparents came to me. My grandfather came to me before he died. And I began to have these unusual experiences. To tell you the truth, I wasn't comfortable with them. I mean, I wasn't really happy. Like, oh, look at what's happening. This is cool. It was like, why is this happening? And I couldn't seem to find the answer. Dr. Moody's book, hadn't come out yet about experiences of dying. That was later in the 70s. So I was struggling to find out what was going on in my world, why everything was so different.
So this first spirit that came to you after shortly after they passed, was this a spirit guide or just your first recognition of, hey, something's different?
Well, the spirit that came to me was, the spirits at first were actually living people that had passed away, and I did not know of yet. Later, in the 80s, I had different experiences of symbolic experiences where it actually appeared to me as though it was truly happening. For one thing, I was taking a nap and I woke up on my bedroom window. There was a huge eagle batting to get in. Its wings against my window. I actually think that's what woke me up. Mm-hmm. That's impossible. I'm in San Francisco. There are no eagles in San Francisco. And after that, what began to change were I started teaching classes. People started coming to classes. I never advertised for what I did with readings. Classes, yes, but I never advertised. readings. People just told other people, and more people came. I always thought, well, I better get a job. But I was a young mother at home, and then I became a single mother, and I worked jobs, but people kept coming and wanting readings and wanting to talk to people that had passed. And so I did it as an interest, and I did it as a feeling of, I need to do this.
Okay.
And only one time when I was upstate New York visiting a friend, I wanted to find out why I was given this particular ability. You know, sometimes people call it a gift. I say it's both a blessing and, not necessarily always a gift. It could be, it's a burden at times.
So,
and I asked, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, I asked her, I said, you were asking about CHT, that's Certified Hypnotherapist. I became a hypnotherapist so I could work at a clinic in San Francisco. Worked with people to help them. My interest really was in past lives, to find out about past life.
Okay.
But anyways,
okay, since you were interested in past lives, what was the first really big aha, I didn't know this about past lives, that really got your juices flowing for being a medium and a psychic?
Well, actually, past lives is something I experienced, and I always knew since I was 10 and 11 years old that I lived other times. I was so aware of it, but I grew up in a very strong Catholic family. We did not talk about this kind of, you're talking the 50s to 60s. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about reincarnation at that time, later in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was about 16, I started doing yoga, and I found out about actual karmic yoga, past lives, and I experienced what I had thought was other times, that I had possible other times that I lived before. And so I became very interested in a young age.
Oh. So does yoga clear your mind so you can meditate? Is that the function of yoga? Okay.
Yeah, that's when I started the whole process. I was as I always say, I was a product of my environment, San Francisco, during the mid-late 60s. So I wasn't like I was looking for this meditation place. I was looking more for where the party was.
Okay.
I just started doing yoga, because I just was drawn to it. And you were right. And then I began to learn about meditation. And over the years have always continuously joined different groups or ways of staying in that meditative state, because it's not really easy to be quiet in the mind.
Well, that's for sure, with all the buzzing and white noise in the background, especially if you live in San Francisco and around my area, which I'm not even in what you would call, I'm in a rural area, and road noise and everything's all over the place. It's hard to, unless you get out in the middle of the woods where I live, you're always bombarded with stimuli that would...
Absolutely. Bombarded's a good word.
Yeah.
And that's why I do get out now. In my later years, I make it a point to be out in nature often. Now I live I live outside of San Francisco, not far, but I'm right by the ocean.
Oh.
And I'm right by the hills. There's a lot of trees, and, had a horse, and so my horse just recently passed away a month ago. And so nature is absolutely the best place people should be out in.
Okay.
In some form.
All right. So about these near-death experiences, and you mentioned to me Walkins. Can you explain to the audience all about that particular word? Yeah.
Well, and when when you have a near-death experience, and if you're talking about walk-ins, I was asked if I was a walk-in. I had no idea what that meant. This is the early 1980s, and my accident was in 1970s. And I said, I don't know, what is a walk-in? Well, Ruth Montgomery, who's a psychic and author of several books that I was introduced to and started to read. One of them is Stranger Among Us. And I write about this in my book, How to Talk with Spirits. I took a lot of questions from people, and somebody said, are you a walk-in? Again, I'm asked all these years later. And Ruth Montgomery talks about Walkins are people from other dimensions who you could think of them as spirit guides, angels, teachers, that when a person has a serious illness, and very serious meaning on the brink of death, and or a traumatic accident, and they leave and then they came back like I did, a near-death experience, you share your energy, you share your space with a being that wants to also be part of the world. It could be, again, a teacher. It could be a helper, a healer, comes through you so that you're sharing your physical, emotional, mental body. And it goes in different degrees. Like, because I like to be a little bit in control, I'm not going to turn my body over to another being. So when you come back in, it often is kind of a feeling of who am I, and depression, and even a sense of isolating. I went through wanting to isolate myself. I no longer wanted to participate the same way. I'm sure some of that was because physically I had changed. My accident caused a tremendous amount of very obvious facial scars, and I didn't want to be part of it being in society. So you begin to feel differently, and over a period of time, you just look at life differently, and often your course of life changes. How did I become this psychic reader, medium, writing books? That was nothing on my agenda when I was young. I was not interested. I didn't even think about it, to tell you the truth.
Mm. So what got you doing this the first time, that you actually wanted to go in and help people with your psychic gifts, with your knowledge of the afterlife?
Well, first of all, I had to be willing to talk about it. And I actually started doing readings in 1973 when I went to take my class. And the teacher said, you should be doing these. You're really good. I did not think of including, all I thought is, well, I'm learning the tarot cards. Wow, this is really cool. And I could see things about people and tell them things. Not until later, probably more toward the 1980s. I started to openly tell people, I've been to the other side. People are going to look at you very strange. They do look at you very strange. Over the years I've got used to it. And they say, that's weird. And people don't do it. And then you have skeptics. And then you have people that want to hang on every word you're saying. So you've got to really battle between the ego and, could this be a possibility? And what I learned is, as I'm reading for people, I want to be able to give them the insights so that they feel, well, I don't, you do know I'm retired from that, so I just want people to know. But I found that people were really relying upon me. That's a big responsibility. I had to do more meditations. I had to get clear. I had to find out, why did I go to the other side, and why did I come back to do this kind of work? People were coming to me, all the time.
Now,
and I didn't want to be that fortune teller.
Now, do you have issues with, say, spirits coming from the other side and coming to you to pass on some knowledge, or, hey, I need you to tell this person this or that person this?
Yes. I get voices of. Here's a funny example I give. So I'm standing in Safeway looking up at what kind of beans should I buy, and there's a man standing next to me, and I could just feel his father had a message, and he's an adult man, and a senior, older, and I'm thinking, I gotta give this guy this message, but how am I going to give this guy the message without feeling I'm invading him? People don't really appreciate you walking up and say, hey, by the way, your father's at your side, and he wants to tell you this. It's really kind of offensive to a lot of people, they get scared. And so I looked at and I said to him, my father always liked pinto beans, and I'm thinking of making some kind of a bean soup. And he says, funny you should say that. He says, because, my father just passed away a while ago, and I was thinking of doing something similar. I said, fathers can really be helpful, can't they? And so that was how I passed on this message that his father was close to him. Just by talking about something and getting him to talk about his father. And we had a little longer conversation than that, but, and that was it. Standing in the supermarket looking at beans. I always think that's a funny story to myself.
Hey, folks, thanks for listening to this best of sample of some of my 5 years in doing this radio show podcast called Chasing the Truth. Please visit iamdarkwaters.com, or you can email me at ShawnG@iamdarkwaters.com. And my numbers and links are in the description below. God bless y'all, and I'll catch you on the flip side.